Thank you very much, Ogechi, for joining us. She's the program coordinator at a small-scale women farmers organization in Nigeria. And I think that we have very limited time, so we're going to get right to it. I initially wondered why I was the one picked to do this, because I do not know that I have any expertise in agriculture, but I must tell you something, and something I'm very proud of. This year, I became a farmer, and I do not mean the garden in my backyard. I mean a proper farm, you know, collaborating with my siblings. We're able to buy close to 20 hectares of land where we're now doing farming. And why did we do that? If we notice, I mean, across the country now, there is this wave, especially for those of us on social media, there is this wave of young people who are teaching you how to multiply your money. They're teaching you about financial literacy, you know, buy bonds, buy treasury bills, buy. Have you ever asked yourself, what's the impact of that? You know, if all of us were buying treasury bills and buying bonds and buying stocks, which are all good things to do, you know, how do these things really impact the real economy? How does it impact agriculture, for instance? How does it ensure that there's more food in the market? So I think that while we're learning how to invest and do all of these things around financial literacy, we must also look at the impact which we're hoping that our money will have in the economy. So if, for instance, you are not able to be a farmer yourself because you do not have the time to be a journalist and be a farmer, can you find those with whom you can partner, whom you can also put your money and say, look, I will give you some money, can I get some interest at the end of the day? I think that's one of the things that has motivated me, and I'm hoping will also inspire you as you go on in your investment business. Can I get an eye if you understood what I was saying? Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. So we can start this conversation now, and I think that's why I must thank CGID for, you know, letting me do this, even though initially I was wondering, I'm not a farmer, but now I'm a farmer, so at least we can have this conversation. And there are sufficient statistics to really get us worried. We understand that agriculture contributes about 24% to our GDP. It employs about 36% of labor force, so these are real figures. 36% of Nigerians depend on agriculture. 70.8 million hectares we understand are arable. In other words, they are farmable. However, we only cultivate about 46%. So it says in the stats. And the stats go on and on and on. Yet, about 25 million of us are still at the risk of food insecurity. I think Kayode reeled out a few. They say about 21.3% of us experienced hunger in 2020 and 2021. 18% of our population undernourished. 31.5% of children under 5 are stunted in a country so rich. 6.5% of children under 5 are wasted. So that's something that should really get us thinking about agriculture. And since journalism these days is now about solutions, what are the solutions that we can come up with to get, you know, food insecurity to be a thing of the past, especially not just for Nigeria, but, you know, also for the continent? I have already introduced my panel, so I'm just going to get right to it. And I'm going to start with the very first one. These are some of the statistics that we have been inundated with, and I'm sure that the Ministry of Agriculture is no stranger to them. What are some of the policies that are being put in place to mitigate some of these statistics that we're currently seeing?
Thank you very much, Ma. And okay. It's because you are hearing the voice of a man sitting for a woman.
Oh, I see. That's okay.
All right. Thank you very much. First, let me, first of all, give the goodwill of the director. She's far away room, attending a conference organized by the FAO. That's why she cannot be here. So, having said that, the umbrella policy for agriculture in Nigeria currently is the National Agricultural Technology and Innovation Policy 2021. That is the umbrella policy, under which we have other smaller policies that address a particular value chain. For instance, the National Dairy Policy, which was unveiled June 1st, 2024. Then we have interventions, like You have the dry season wheat program. You have the dry season program generally. And you have the respective ministerial interventions. And we should always remember that agriculture is on the concurrent list. The federal government does it at the policy level, some implementation, regulation. Then the states is where the real implementation takes place. So they buy into these policies at different stages, giving it different meanings.
So I want to ask you, where are the gaps? Because if you say that implementation is at the state level, which is true, because states is where the land, this 70.8 million hectares we're talking about, is scattered across the 36 states of the Federation, including the FCT. You know, where are the gaps? Is it that the states are not keen into it? Is it that they don't care enough about it? Is it that they're not prioritizing it? What exactly is still giving us this, feeling, this statistics around food insecurity, which we're currently experiencing?
Thank you very much. Number one, states practice agric the way they see it, that best suits their people. In the north, in the south, there are different approaches. That's number one. But the prevailing problem, the major one, is the insecurity. That is the major problem. Where farmers will go to the farm, they may be allowed to do the farming. When it comes to harvest, they chase them away. That's number one. Number two, agriculture is now very wide. A whole lot of people. Nigeria feeds almost the entire West Africa.
Okay.
And we now have the situation with our currency. If you ask me, as a farmer, I will say I'm enjoying the best of my moments because I'm selling at a bigger price now. When I do the farming, just like you said, we are talking about 10 hectares of land now. A whole lot of money is coming out of that, depending on how you want to do it. You want to sell it straight to the market, or you want to go for processing before it goes, depending on what you produce anyway.
Well, you can hear somebody who's willing to give you advice should you want to go into it, but the dangers are still there. So I'll ask you to take advantage. Take a good look at his face and talk to him after this particular panel if you're interested in agriculture. But let me go to my next guest now, my next panelist, Temitope Adegoroye. I want to ask, how is the private sector contributing to food? Which is, the questions that some of the questions that have been, we're hoping we'll ask. But I want you to also speak to gaps. Where does the private sector come in the middle of government policies? Do you look at them before you key into what it is that you decide to go into, the particular area of agriculture you want to invest in? How precisely is the private sector looking at agriculture, especially when it's coming from government quarters?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. To the question, I would say that in reality, food production or processing or storage, the entire chain of food is driven by the private sector. Without the private sector, we really can't, we won't have food to eat. And I know that the president would agree with me that from the farm, after the farmer has completed the production, the farmer definitely has to hand over to, another actor who is operating within I like to call them the middle of the chain. And they are the ones who actually cement all of the ends of the chain and really tie things together. The private sector ensures that maize grain from the farm, gets, turned or processed into custard or into the breakfast cereal on the table of the consumer. They ensure that fish being raised in someone's pond, gets processed without, smoked or whatever. Or, at least find its way into a restaurant or into on the table of a consumer. So they play a very critical role. In fact, a managing partner, Sahel, and executive chair have another organization called the African Food Change Makers. And at the African Food Change Makers, we call the private sector, especially the small and medium scale businesses, we call them the lifeblood of the food ecosystem. because we believe without them, we really do not have a food ecosystem. But of course, they are faced with a lot of challenges. And if you ask me to rank those challenges in order of severity, I would say finance, We've talked a lot about limited access to finance many times, or I'll probably put it in a much better way to say limited access to affordable finance. When you speak with banks, commercial banks, they're going to tell you, oh, finance is there. I mean, people are not coming to take it. But is it affordable to a smallholder farmer? Is it affordable to a medium-sized business? It won't be the likes of Holland or the big guys, really, that is driving or that are driving food security to be those businesses. We have millions of SMEs in Nigeria who, wake up every day, process, link up with the farmers and, drive the logistics in the cold storage and all or whatnot. So finance is very critical. The second is training. Training, yes. Training, specific technical expertise in their lines of businesses, or training around, business modeling and the ability to really think through what the business model or the business structure for that particular, enterprise really is. So they need a lot of capacity building to really understand that. Part of the capacity building or the training gap is also the understanding of the policy environment. Many of the businesses and the smallholder farmers don't even understand that some of those policies that Dr. Obilade mentioned exist. A number of them are still operating thinking, oh, the government really is not doing anything. When you start to interact with them to say, are you aware that there's this policy that you can actually walk to the Ministry of Agriculture or the Ministry of Trade and Investment? They will be wowed that this actually exists. So an understanding of a knowledge or the need to, that emphasizes or echoes the need for a knowledge hub where entrepreneurs could actually go to really, access the right data or information. The third one that I would mention that I think it's a very critical gap is the community of support. This is business, this is investment, this is entrepreneurship. It is not a joke. It requires a lot of hard work, and it requires you to have the right community of support around you. And many of those entrepreneurs don't have that. Many of them need the right incubation platforms. They need the right accelerator programs. But they really they are in short, they're in short supply. And I think the government needs to take a lot of hard look into understanding what currently exists in the ecosystem that could actually, help those entrepreneurs.
It's interesting you've mentioned finance, training, and community support as the three biggest challenges. So I'll come back to you, but let me quickly go to Ogechi. Do you think that there's anything unique about the challenges that women face apart from what has been enumerated by Temitope?
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. So when he was talking, my mind went to the issue around access to finance, or credits rather. And we work with smallholder women farmers. We have one-on-one conversations with them. We understand their issues and how the kind of challenges that they face. And another issue, when the director spoke earlier, was around insecurity. Insecurity is a major challenge, and honestly, the government need to really take, steps, measures in place, to make these women be able to access their farmlands. Because right now, most of the women are leaving the farms. They can no longer go to the farms anymore because it's no longer secured. Another issue is access to and control of land. They don't have land, they don't have access, one. So you have to lease the land, to be able to farm for a particular period of time. And we've had cases where you're farming on a particular land, maybe you're almost close to harvesting, and the person who has leased that land to you is coming to tell you, please, I want to have my land back. So there is no agreement between the farmer and the person who is leasing the land, and in most cases are always the men. So the woman is scared, she doesn't have anything to show that, okay, I actually paid this person this amount to have this land. So we have such cases. Issues around access to information. is another problem, because we're talking about people, women in the rural areas, they don't have access to network, information. When there are agricultural inputs being distributed by the government, they don't have the timely information to those kind of, they don't have timely information really. So by the time they are getting the information and trying to get to the ministry or wherever, the Agricultural Development Program office, most of these agricultural inputs have been, exhausted, and the women come back without anything. I'm going to go back to access to credit. So if financial institutions will come up with friendly, products that the women can be able to say, okay, I'm going to access this credit, but then the collateral is little or nothing, because you're dealing with rural women. They don't have the money. You are trying to help them improve on what they are doing. So how can the financial institutions begin to have friendly products that can help the women access these products and better improve on what they are doing? Can we also begin to help the women get access to the markets? So it's one thing for a woman to farm, it's another thing for her to have markets. So after farming, at the end of the season, she's harvested, you now have to deal with middlemen. And it's a big challenge as well, because at some point, they don't have access to the market, so they have to deal with the middlemen, who then buy off from them at a very, very little or nothing, in terms of pricing. And then the middlemen will now go back and sell at a high price. Now we are dealing with issues around fuel subsidy removal, which has actually skyrocketed the cost of transportation. Mm-hmm. The women don't have the kind of resources or money to be able to transport those goods to the market. So policies and subsidies that can be friendly for the women, because we are talking about rural women farmers, and also to state that these are the major producers of agriculture in Nigeria. So what can we do as both the government and other relevant stakeholders to support the women and what they're doing?
Big questions. Let me come to Mr. Kabir Ibrahim now, who is the president of All Farmers Association. I'm just wondering, you have heard some of the challenges that have been listed. But one key question, because I do know that after farmers have, done the farming, they have to deal with middlemen, and they also have to deal with markets. One of the things that's most painful is post-harvest losses. And it's such a shame to think that a lot of the food which we produce doesn't end up in the market. Rather, it is wasted. Even the ones that make their way to the market, there is no real way of preserving the produce. For instance, vegetables, tomatoes, all of those things that are perishables. I do not know whether the Farmers Association have really thought through some of the challenges that they're facing and are thinking up solutions to address some of these challenges.
Well, I thank you immensely for having me. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I will restrict my discussion to post-harvest loss. It is a very important threat factor to the attainment of food security in Nigeria, because it gets up to 45, sometimes 50%. And so we cannot bring anything like food on the table of people who really want it. And our population is very high. We are now 200 plus million. In about 26 years would be 400 million. So this is a very serious threat factor. And the only thing that the farmers would yearn for is the possibility of the government working on the energy sector. You mentioned vegetables, for instance. We make effort to get seeds that have long shelf life when they produce their fruits, but we need to have avenues to be able to prolong the shelf life of some of these items, i.e. we need cold storage so that we keep whatever we produce at ambient temperatures so that they will be there. And we need to be able to harvest what we produce properly. We need to have some technology in harvesting so that we don't lose. Take other grains like rice. If rice falls into the sand and you pack it with the sand, nobody eats rice when there is a lot of sand in it. And so also many other grains. So it's a very important factor that we have a deliberate policy beyond the raw stored materials institute that is in Ilorin, bringing out many issues like the airtight containers to put some of the grains so that they last a long time and all that. We need to go to every local government, every cranny, to provide for technologies that will prolong the shelf life of produce from the farmers. Unless we do that, all our efforts, the smallholder farmers are the engine room of food security in this country, now that we don't have much automation. We need to optimize our productivity. But when we optimize our productivity and we lose everything, when we harvest, it's a problem. We do not have enough. And I told you earlier on that our population is ever rising.
Yeah.
And then I think the director also mentioned that in this hemisphere, we are responsible for feeding almost all the countries around us. Nigeria is endowed with a lot of arable and cultivable and irrigable land. But we have many people that we have to feed as a matter of necessity because our borders are porous and our relationships cut across all borders. And Africa today is one market. We have AFTA. There is no way we can do too much protectionism. We must bring everything that we have outside, and so many people will come to buy from us. So the more we maximize what we have inwards or internally, the more the possibility of getting food sufficiency and then getting food security. And the most important thing, and why I came here, was the insecurity associated with food availability. And that is why I think we should dwell on this, and we should call on government and all people of Nigeria to work very hard. Just like Maupe has been now is farming, everybody should farm. If a householder gives his wife money to buy vegetables in any of these markets, anywhere in Nigeria, if he gives her 10,000 today, tomorrow it might be 20,000. The purchasing power of the naira is low. We lose so much because of post-harvest loss. We have a lot of insecurity that is a threat factor to productivity. We have climate change that is a very serious threat factor to what we produce. And especially this year, I wonder whether you have taken note that the flooding came just at the point of harvest. Most of our crops were ready for harvest, and then there was this very serious flooding. So we did not lose just plantation. In some cases, and in many cases, we lost grains. Everything was washed away. Some people lost everything that they had. And this is a serious factor. So climate change is now equal to insecurity, or even more. And then we have to also commit to all the commitments that we made at the various COP meetings. I don't know what is coming out of COP29 now, but in COP28, we committed to a lot of things to mitigate climate change. I don't know what we are doing now, and I don't know what we have done as a nation in the year that passed. So a lot of things have to be done. We have to all be our brothers' keepers and our sisters' keepers. Everybody should put their hands on deck on this issue of insecurity. Insecurity, physical insecurity, and then food insecurity as well. You must be able to contribute your quota, no matter how small, to the food system. The global challenge on food systems is echoed by the work that the United Nations did in 2021. You remember that. There was a meeting that the UN Secretary General convened on food systems all over the world, because the challenge in food started in earnest from COVID-19. In Nigeria, we have been unfortunate. We have had floodings that we used to have at 10-year intervals. It's now becoming an annual thing.
Yeah.
So we are in terrible trouble, and we need to work very hard. We need to be our brothers and sisters keepers, and we need to cut down on post-harvest loss, because you see food, and most of it is lost before it gets to the port, and that is very serious.
Well, you have said quite a lot, and I mean, as a journalist, I can relate with almost everything that you have said, because these are issues that we're dealing with on a daily basis. I mean, first, as a woman, I go to the market, believe it or not. You feel the prices of food items every day, they're going up, and it's simple economics. If there is, limited supply, the prices will always, go high. As a journalist reporting about these issues on a daily basis, flood here, too much rain here, drought here, these are things that, have an impact, a direct impact on what it is that we all experience. So, I totally can feel the passion with which you're speaking and enumerating these issues. But what I also find very interesting is, depending on whom you ask, it will seem that the number one challenge is different. So when, the gentleman, Mr. Ibironke, is it Ibironke? Ibilade was speaking, he listed insecurity as a major issue. The next guest had a different major issue, which is finance, training, and insecurity didn't quite feature, even though I'm sure you would have said it if you had been given enough time. So these are some of the things, some things are out of your hands in the Federal Ministry of Agriculture. For instance, insecurity. I imagine that you have put that squarely at the foot of security agencies to do something about it. However, some other things are within your control, like the issue of training, the issue of advocating for finance. I do know that there is a Bank of Agriculture. It's not clear how effective they are. If a lot of people are still talking about how finance, access to credit is an issue, what is the ministry doing about it?
Thank you very much, ma'am. Access to credit to the big-time farmer is almost no issue. When we talk about the large farms, like all of that Mr. Adegoroye talked about, and some other big farms that way.
They have access. They don't have a problem.
They don't have problems with finance. Mm-hmm. Many of them come with the total package. The inputs they are going to use, the technology, the training they are going to provide for farmers that are growers. They have everything. But what about the Nigerian farmers? Let me say something here. When we are talking about the smallholder farmer, it has gone down to micro-small now. Because a smallholder farmer, you expect him to have maybe about 2 acres of land. How many farmers have 2 acres of land? When Nigerians decide to grow fat instead of growing tall, what do I mean? Go along any major, from one city to the other now, what you see now are estates. And these are good agricultural lands. Turning them to estates, what is planning doing? What is the respective state planning authorities doing? Where does the city end? Where does the farmland start? This is a major problem. Go to the agricultural area in Abuja here, that's Kuje. You see estates.
Well, this is the first time I've heard the Ministry of Agriculture complain about it.
I'm complaining.
You're complaining?
Yes.
It's the first time I've heard it. Has any other journalist heard this complaint? Huh? Is it news to you? Okay, I think that many people haven't heard this.
Yeah, let's look at it this way. Everybody wants to own a house.
Home, yes.
And he wants to buy his own land. Okay, let A build his own house and deck it, and B put his own on top. No, he doesn't want that. And that is what we see elsewhere. There are agricultural lands that are respected. Nobody tampers with agric land. But here, 240 million, like Afan has just mentioned, and growing. And everybody wants to buy land. Okay, let's now come to what the government is doing for the smallholder farmer.
I was going to say that in that respect, has there been any collaboration with, say, Ministry of Planning in the states, in the FCT, to say, we cannot farm, you cannot put estates on all the land. We have to reserve some land for farming. Has there been work around that area?
Thank you, man. A lot of work, a lot of discussion, but we still know that the land belongs to the state. If the state says, I want to build a state, you cannot stop them. What the government can do, like the federal government, like the department I belong to, that's Animal Husbandry, is to look into the respective grazing reserves. These are land that are dedicated to cattle grazing, to livestock production. That is where we are restricted to. And the grazing reserves now is being competed for by crop farmers, because that is where you find the fadama. So a lot of issues are going on at the same time. Okay. So to the smallholder farmer, the federal government, currently, there's what we call the agro pocket. It's a sort of subsidy for the micro small, let me use that word, so that the cost of input is being reduced. We have had
Micro pocket.
Agro pocket.
Agro pocket.
Agro pocket.
You've heard of it?
Yeah.
I've heard of it, but then how many farmers, how many women farmers have actually accessed
Yes, the respective state coordinating offices, FMAFS, were in the field about 3 weeks ago. Probably they are still collecting data because we need that data. We do not have adequate data to work with. If we say people should come and get these inputs, they will get it. Before you turn your back, they are selling it. Mm-hmm. That's Nigerians. So who are the real farmers? Today, if you have an intervention on fishery, everybody is a fish farmer. If you have on cassava, everybody becomes a cassava farmer. Just because they want to access these inputs and sell, they want money. So that's number one. Number two, we have the tractor hiring services being run by the private sector, not the government. It's only government enabled. We have the improved services and inputs. A lot of these things are coming out from IITA and other research institutes in Nigeria. Then we have the respective budgetary interventions across the value chains. You have for rice, you have for wheat, you have for cassava, maize, and all of that, including livestock. Then, for the proper smallholder, that is where we have the CBN with a lot of interventions, the BOI across the value chains, especially when it comes to processing. Then the capacity building that Mr. Adegoroye talked about, the USAID and other development partners are doing quite a lot here. For the government side, there is the budgetary process, there is the procurement process that takes a lot of time, which if it's not completed, the ministry cannot spend 1 kobo. And by the time it's completed, we are already beyond the planting season when the farmers need these interventions. So that is where you have the development partners, like his own consulting firm, the Sahel Consulting, are doing quite a lot, especially in the dairy space. Quite a lot. We are partnering with them. We are partnering with so many other development partners, just to see that we don't have that very wide gap.
Okay. So let me quickly come to you then, since you said you're partnering a lot. That's what it says. I hope it's not putting you on the spot. But let me ask you how this partnership can then be strengthened to get us out of this quagmire where our people are not food insecure, not this year, not the following year.
Thanks for the question. I think it's a big mess because it's a complex issue. But I think that, and I think the government still has a lot to do. The government is doing a lot already. Kudos to the ministry, but I think the government has a lot to do still.
When you say government, do you mean just the federal government or are state governments included?
Collective. And let me give you an example, because I'm going somewhere with the need to be a bit more strategic in government's intervention and government's ability to address the issues within the food ecosystem. And we still have that challenge of complexity within government and multiple layers of government trying to do the same thing. I'm a management consultant by training, so I know that if you don't have a strategic plan, or you don't have a roadmap, or you don't have a business plan as a business, you're not going anywhere. Because you don't know where you want to get to in the next 3 years, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years.
So to the question.
Who is responsible?
Because we're already being wrapped up.
Yeah, so the key here is who is responsible for driving policy? Is it the Ministry of Agriculture? Is it the Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning? Is it the Office of the Vice President? That has to be answered. But let me come to your question. Collaboration, of course, is very important. But again, it has to be targeted. It has to be strategic with government. And I think there are two broad issues we've talked about. There's an issue with productivity and the need to increase productivity. There is an issue of ensuring we protect what we've already produced and reduce food losses. Those two things need a lot of collaboration and public-private partnerships. And that's why I say the government has to really be more strategic about it, because you can't solve every problem. And there are already lots of tested solutions and ideas in the private sector that the government basically just needs to support and scale. I've said it many times that the government has no business in implementing projects here and there. You have plans, you have a strategy. Call on the Farmers Association of Nigeria. We have AFAN, we have SWOFON, we have all kinds of commodity associations. We have a group in Nigeria driving the need to have access to cold chain infrastructure. How is the government engaging those various institutions and associations and organizations to co-create solutions that through public-private partnership framework can address all of those issues? How is the government partnering, for example, with private security intelligence agencies to address insecurity issues? At the end of the day, there is a little the government can do, and maybe there's a need to redefine the role of the government itself and not just really trying to address those issues. Let the private sector fly. Let the farmers fly. Let those associations really work. Support them with the enabling environment. Nigeria is so blessed.
Indeed. I have to agree with you on that particular one. So over to you, Ogechi. I'm going to take Ogechi, then I will come to Mr. Hakim there. Ogechi, what are your thoughts? I mean, in terms of, I don't know whether you want to add to, what has been said so far, because he's enumerated some of the government support. I saw you saying how many women. Yeah. Also the issue of data. Is this something you're also working on? And I also like your last words as we wrap up this particular session.
Okay, so governments come up with programs, and yet a lot of women farmers don't have access to those programs. So how can they begin to make it accessible to the women farmers? Because for me personally, I feel like I know that the women farmers are the major producers of agriculture in Nigeria, and then you need to begin to target them with the right programs, with the right interventions that can help them better improve on what they are doing. Honestly, by come 2025, the cost of food will go higher than what it is right now. So what are we going to do differently to ensure that these women have the right inputs, agricultural inputs, access to a lot of things that would help them increase their productivity level? Because that is what we are suffering now. We're looking at issues around fuel subsidy removal and how the cost of transportation has actually gone up. Also trying to talk on, I've touched the area of the programs, incentives, that can also support the women as well. Issues around climate change is a different ball game, and also what can collaboration with the NIMET and other agencies that are into weather forecasting, how can they trickle down information around weather forecasting, even in the local languages? These are the kind of issues that we need to begin to talk about, and collaboration really. So just as brother from Sahel just mentioned, how can we collaborate? So beyond government and relevant stakeholders, how can you bring in the women farmers who are the main beneficiaries into the room to speak on these issues, to come up with ideas, their own ideas really on what, can be done differently. Yeah. So
thank you very much, Ogechi. I want to say Alhaji, but I am not certain if I'm allowed to say that. Mr. Kabir Ibrahim, some of the things which you have enumerated really frighten me. When I think about the fact that floods have washed away the produce, or that floods, spoiled agricultural produce just before they were about to be harvested, and I think about the impact of that, what it would mean for market prices. This is the dry season we're entering. We know that usually about this time, vegetables are a little more bearable to buy. We are able to buy tomatoes, etc. If we're unable to buy, if the prices don't come down because they are not available, what will happen in the next season when the rains come? These are big questions, and that's exactly how it works. I'm just wondering, what solutions are farmers beginning to think of themselves? Apart from advocacy and asking government, can you highlight a few of the the things that farmers themselves are beginning. I don't want to believe that they're just going to be waiting, you know, and watch their own investments go down the drain.
Thank you very much for asking me to wrap up this. The truth is, we don't wait for government to give us anything to go to the farm. Whatever comes from government is a bonus. The real farmer will farm, regardless of all the inhibiting factors. I invite every one of you to come to kilometer 28 along Abuja-Kefi Road. We are doing the National Agricultural Show. We are doing the 16th edition. It is commencing today, but the official opening will be tomorrow. Now, I want you to see resilience at play. We have so many people exhibiting what they have been able to produce in spite of the threat factors of flooding, drought, and insecurity, and lack of or easy access to finance, and probably some collaboration with some agencies and all that. Now, the truth is, every country in the world can only be self-sufficient in food if it produces what it eats and eats what it produces. And we must also be able to take the fact of, or the reality of, that we have 6 geopolitical zones and we have different staples in every zone. The broad way of looking at food security by, let's say, emphasizing rice or wheat or any other crop is not going to work in Nigeria. You must look at every geopolitical zone, identify a staple, accentuate the production of that staple. Those people in that zone will be food secure if they have that. Every country will do that to be able to do that. We have the peculiarity of being very diverse. We should do that. Now, as to the effect of climate change, for instance, that brings out flooding, the good science and engineering has made the Netherlands not to experience any flooding at all. And 30% of it lives below sea level. And I'm not sure that anybody has said anything about flooding there. So a lot of work has to be done to mitigate all these factors. The agriculture is serious business. It's not sitting down and wagging your tongue or saying this one has not done that, blaming this, blaming that. No. And we should also know that agriculture does not take place in Abuja. It takes place in the states. The subnationals must work towards agriculture and invest properly in agriculture. I'm sorry to tell the director that he's probably looking at agriculture as an Abuja matter because he's here. When he says, competitions, because people want to build estates and all that. Go to the rural areas. There is too much land to be cultivated there. In fact, your statistics of 70.8 million hectares is even wrong. I can tell you that. I've been around in this business for over 25 years. I was president of poultry, now president of AFAN, chairman of NAFAN, president of Nigeria Agribusiness. I should know what is happening in Nigeria. There is a lot of land, there are a lot of possibilities, there is a lot of manpower, there is a lot of commitment on the, from the point of view of small farmers. All we need is incentivization. In this year's theme for the Agri Show, I am saying the president, if he declared a state of emergency on food, should go to the fair ground, to the show ground, to really encourage farmers to continue doing what they are doing, and while we're still working on taming insecurity, providing all the things necessary to be able to make us work better. So I thank you immensely for having me.
Thank you very much. I really thank you. I have to thank members of my panel. Sorry, our time has been far up. It's been up since forever. And I have to thank you guys for being very generous. Our panel has encouraged all of us to go into agriculture, to look at it as not just the means of earning, an extra income, but also something that impacts on the economy directly. We've enumerated the challenges from access to finance, insecurity, climate change. It's a very big issue. but we've also come up with solutions, some of which are within our reach, and we've also been invited by the Association of, by the Association of All Farmers in Nigeria. So I have to thank my panelists for your very brilliant contributions. I hope that we've been given some food for thought as to what exactly we should be doing around agriculture. Let me quickly thank my panelists, Mr. Adegoroye, I beg your pardon now, I'm trying to quickly find the name. Mr. Akim Ibilade, who is the Deputy Director of Commercial, Ruminant and Dairy Production at the Federal Ministry of Agriculture. Thank you for coming. Mr. Temitope Adegoroye with Sahel Consulting. Thank you so much for coming. Kabir Ibrahim, National President, All Farmers Association of Nigeria. Thank you for coming. And Ogechi Okebugu, who is the Program Coordinator, Small Scale Women Farmers Organization in Nigeria. Thank you also for coming. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for this panel.